It was supposed to be a normal night. I had just finished my work, looking forward to the quiet comfort of home, yet something felt off. The house, usually warm and welcoming, felt strangely cold. There was a tension in the air I couldn't quite place, a subtle shift in the way she moved, spoke, even smiled. My heart whispered that something wasn't right, but my mind, desperate to believe in normalcy, tried to dismiss the unease. She met me in the living room with that same casual smile she always wore, but it didn't reach her eyes. I noticed the way her fingers lingered over her phone, her gaze flicking to it in a way that made my stomach twist. "You'll have to sleep in the garage tonight," she said softly, as if delivering the most ordinary news in the world. "My friend is coming over." I froze. The words hung in the air like a warning I wasn't prepared for. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the smile on her face with the cold reality of her words. A friend? At this hour? And why was I being banished to the garage, a space I had only passed through on weekends for storage or car maintenance? Something in me knew this wasn't just about hospitality. I forced a nod, my voice caught somewhere between disbelief and self-preservation. "Okay, sure," I managed to say, though my heart pounded with confusion and unease. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, yet the fear of confrontation held me back. I wondered if I was imagining it, if my suspicions were the result of an overactive mind clinging to shadows in the dark. That night, as I settled into the cold, unfamiliar space of the garage, the wind whispered through cracks in the windows, and every creak of the house made my pulse quicken. I felt isolated, tense, and strangely alert, as if the walls themselves were keeping secrets I wasn't yet ready to know. Little did I know that the hours ahead would shatter the thin veil of normalcy, revealing a truth so shocking it would change everything I thought I knew about her and about myself. In the days leading up to that fateful night, there had been signs, subtle, almost imperceptible, but impossible to ignore once I looked closely. She had started guarding her phone more carefully, slipping it into pockets, locking it without explanation, and smiling nervously when I asked simple questions about her day. Late-night texts became frequent, and when I casually inquired, she would laugh it off, insisting, "It's just work stuff, nothing important." At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, people have private lives, don't they? Friends, colleagues. There's always a world beyond the home. Yet the intuition in my chest refused to be silenced. There was a weight in her gaze, a hesitation in her voice that felt like a secret deliberately withheld. Each excuse, no matter how convincing, only added to the growing tension in my heart. She mentioned her friend often enough to plant the seed of curiosity and fear. I didn't know him, and she never invited me to meet him. And yet, she spoke of him with a familiarity and warmth that made me uneasy, a tone that was far too intimate for a casual acquaintance. My attempts to ask more would be met with a quick smile and a subtle change of subject, as if even acknowledging my concern was a threat. It was during these days that the walls of our relationship seemed to close in around me. Trust, once solid and unshakable, now felt fragile. I started noticing patterns. The whispered phone calls, the sudden quiet when I entered a room, the way she sometimes seemed lost in thought, imagining a world I wasn't part of. I began to wonder, with a growing sense of dread, whether the friend she mentioned was more than a friend. My mind spun with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. And yet, I could not bring myself to confront her, not fully, not until the night she told me I had to sleep in the garage. That single sentence marked the beginning of a revelation I would never forget, a truth that would strike at the very heart of my life. After she sent me to the garage that night, the unease that had been simmering for weeks erupted into a relentless storm. Every creak of the house, every faint whisper of sound, felt magnified in the darkness. I lay on the cold floor, my thoughts spinning uncontrollably, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Why would she send me away like that? Who was this friend she had spoken of with such casual familiarity? In the days that followed, the tension only grew. I began noticing patterns I hadn't seen before. The way she would jump at the slightest notification on her phone, quickly silencing it whenever I looked in her direction. Text messages that seemed harmless enough would disappear before I could even glance at them. Late nights at work became more frequent, and her excuses, though polished, felt rehearsed, almost mechanical. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it, that my fears were the product of insecurity. But every fiber of my being screamed otherwise. Friends who visited would comment on her nervous energy, her occasional flustered expressions when my eyes wandered toward her phone. I started keeping track of the small details, the quick glances, the hushed phone calls, the unexplained absences, and the picture they painted was impossible to ignore. One evening, curiosity and dread collided, and I tried to catch a glimpse of her messages. But the phone was always just out of reach, locked, or wiped clean of conversations. It was as if she were building a barrier around herself, shielding secrets I wasn't meant to see. The frustration was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing on my chest every time I tried to confront her and was met with calm deflections. "You're imagining things," she would say, her voice soft and convincing, designed to make me doubt my own instincts. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floor, every passing shadow, every moment of silence in the house felt like a warning. The paranoia clawed at my mind, but deep down, I knew it wasn't paranoia. It was intuition. Something was wrong. It was far bigger than I could yet comprehend. I felt trapped in my own home, isolated by the lies that surrounded me, waiting for the inevitable moment when the truth would finally emerge. And I sensed, with an almost terrifying clarity, that when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The night she told me to sleep in the garage felt surreal. I carried a blanket and pillow like a soldier preparing for battle, each step heavy with confusion and dread. The garage, usually a place for tools and forgotten boxes, suddenly felt like a prison, cold and unwelcoming. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the house amplified in the silence around me. She kissed me lightly on the cheek as I stepped past her into the dim space. Her smile was calm, almost affectionate, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll be back soon," she said, her voice soft, almost casual. I wanted to ask where she was going, who was coming over, but the words caught in my throat. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I set up my small corner on the concrete floor, trying to make it as comfortable as possible, but comfort was impossible. My thoughts raced, bouncing between disbelief and fear. Was this really about a friend, as she claimed? Or was it something darker, something I wasn't ready to face? The silence pressed down on me, and I found myself straining to listen for any sound that might give me a clue. Hours passed slowly. Every passing minute felt like an eternity. I could hear her moving inside the house. Footsteps, laughter, snippets of conversation muffled by walls. And then, just as I was drifting into a light doze, my phone buzzed. A message? A call? My heart pounded as I reached for it, but it was nothing. Only the shadows, only the silence. I realized in how vulnerable I truly was. Alone, isolated, my senses heightened by fear and uncertainty. The garage was no longer just a place. It was a threshold, a waiting room for the inevitable revelation I could sense was coming. And as I huddled there, trying to calm my racing heart, a chilling thought took root. Whatever was happening inside the house, I was powerless to stop it, and the truth, when it came, would shatter everything I thought I knew. The clock ticked past 3 a.m. when it happened. I had been lying on the cold garage floor for what felt like hours, heart pounding with every creak of the house, every faint whisper of movement. Then my phone buzzed. A message. But it wasn't from her. It was from an unknown number. My hand shook as I opened it, and the words on the screen made my stomach drop. "You need to know the truth," the message began. Then came the screenshots. Messages, photos, and conversations I could never have imagined. My wife's casual words about her friend were a lie, a carefully constructed facade. The truth sprawled across my screen, raw and undeniable. She had not been talking about a friend. She had been hiding a secret, a life that existed without me. I could hardly breathe as I scrolled. There were images of her with someone else, intimate conversations filled with affection and secrecy, late-night rendezvous planned with care to avoid my notice. Every message, every picture was a dagger, twisting deeper into my chest. My mind reeled, tried to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the person revealed in these messages. The most shocking part wasn't just a betrayal. It was a panic in her messages once she realized I might discover the truth. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she had written, her words frantic and desperate. "Please don't come looking for me." That was when I realized why she had sent me to the garage, to keep me out of the house while she tried to cover her tracks. The house suddenly felt like a cage, and I felt both powerless and enraged. Every instinct screamed that I should rush in, confront her, demand answers, but part of me feared what I might see. The truth was no longer a whisper in my mind. It was a blaring siren I could no longer ignore. I stayed in the garage, frozen, reading through the proof over and over. The betrayal was total. The lies, the secrecy, the careful orchestration to keep me in the dark, it all became painfully clear. My heart ached, my hands trembled, and I realized something horrifying. Nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The night I had been sent to the garage was not just a night of exile. It was the moment I was forced to face the devastating reality of her hidden life. The hours after the revelation were a blur of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think clearly. The garage, what had felt like a temporary prison, now became a tomb of my emotions, a place where betrayal echoed off the walls with every heartbeat. My mind replayed the messages, the photos, the undeniable proof of her secret life. Each glance, each smile I had trusted, now felt like a calculated deception. I confronted her the next day, holding my phone with trembling hands, the evidence flashing on the screen like an accusation I could no longer deny. She froze at first, then tried to laugh, to explain, to excuse her actions with words I had no patience to hear. "It's not what it looks like," she said, voice trembling, yet lacking sincerity. Her excuses felt hollow, like a paper wall against a hurricane of truth that had already swept through my life. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, rage, sorrow, and a deep, hollow emptiness that gnawed at my chest. How could someone I loved and trusted so completely orchestrate such a lie? How could she live a life of deception under the same roof? I wanted to scream, to throw, to break. Anything to release the storm inside me, but the weight of betrayal pinned me in place. The isolation was suffocating. Even friends and family couldn't fully understand what I was feeling. Every conversation with them brought a mix of sympathy and frustration, a reminder that life had moved on for everyone else while I was trapped in this personal nightmare. I found myself obsessively replaying moments I had cherished, now tainted with suspicion and pain. Every hug, every whispered word, every shared laugh, the innocence of it all was gone. And yet, amid the heartache, a strange clarity began to emerge. The truth, brutal as it was, gave me a perspective I couldn't have found in ignorance. I realized I had been blind to subtle signs, that my trust had been exploited, but also that I was stronger than I had known. The betrayal cut deep, but it also forced me to confront reality, to confront my feelings, and to consider my next steps with a clear, unflinching eye. Pain had become my teacher, and in the depths of heartbreak, I began to understand the first steps toward reclaiming my life. After days of sleepless nights and endless rumination, I realized that I had a choice. I could allow her betrayal to consume me, to define the rest of my life, or I could take control, reclaim my power, and decide my own future. The clarity that came with acceptance was harsh, but it was also freeing. I could no longer live in the shadow of her lies. I had to act, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect and survival. I began by setting boundaries. Conversations with her became direct, honest, and unflinching. No more half-truths, no more evasions. I demanded answers, but I also demanded respect for myself, for the life I had built, and for the trust that had been broken. Her attempts to manipulate or justify her actions fell flat against the steel of my newfound resolve. Ending the relationship, though painful, became inevitable. There was no forgiveness that could erase the deceit, no reconciliation that could undo the secret life she had led. I packed my belongings with deliberate care, each item a reminder of what had been lost and what I was determined to leave behind. The act of walking away was both terrifying and empowering. I was leaving behind betrayal, but I was also reclaiming my life. Friends and family became my anchor. Their support reminded me that I was not alone, that even in the aftermath of heartbreak, I had people who cared for me and believed in my strength. Slowly, I began to rebuild not just my home, but my sense of self. Each day brought small victories. laughter that returned naturally, routines restored, and a heart slowly healing. I also faced the truth of what had happened with a level-headed clarity. The boyfriend, the secret meetings, the lies. They were all part of a chapter that no longer controlled me. I refused to allow anger or bitterness to dominate my decisions. Instead, I focused on healing, learning, and creating a life that was honest, transparent, and free from manipulation. In the end, my decision was simple. I chose myself. I chose truth over illusion, strength over submission, and freedom over betrayal. And as I stepped into a new chapter, I understood a vital truth. Life will test you. People will deceive you. But your response, your courage, and your resolve will define the person you become. Weeks had passed since the storm of betrayal had shattered my world, yet the memory remained sharp and unyielding. The nights in the garage, the messages, the hidden life she had led, all of it lingered, a reminder of how fragile trust can be. But amid the lingering pain, I discovered something essential. Truth, no matter how devastating, has the power to set you free. I reflected on the warning signs I had overlooked, the subtle clues that intuition had whispered but I had ignored. Late-night calls, evasive answers, secretive behavior. These were the threads of a story I had failed to see in time. I could dwell on regret, but I realized that what mattered now was understanding and growth. The betrayal was a harsh teacher, but it had taught me lessons I could never have learned otherwise. Life gradually moved forward. I rebuilt routines, strengthened relationships with friends and family, and reconnected with a part of myself that had been buried under fear and doubt. Trust in others had been shaken, but more importantly, I learned to trust myself again. My instincts, once silenced, had been proven valid, and that knowledge became a quiet source of strength. The scars remained, but they no longer represented weakness. They were proof of resilience, evidence that even in the face of deception and heartbreak, one can endure, recover, and reclaim control over life. I realized that love, though precious, must be paired with honesty and respect, and that self-respect is a cornerstone of any relationship. Looking back, I understood that betrayal is not the end. It is a turning point. The truth can hurt, but it also illuminates the path forward. I emerged stronger, wiser, and more cautious, yet not cynical. Life continues, and so does hope, tempered by experience but never extinguished. And in that understanding, I found peace, the courage to move forward, the wisdom to recognize deceit, and the strength to prioritize my own heart above all else.